Everyone in the galaxy feared the unknown race, except the foolhardy humans, who were the only ones cocksure enough to charge headfirst into their forbidden space. The rugged human starship captain Dylan Lewis docked his heavily armed trade vessel at a seedy spaceport on the fringe of known space. He strode through the grimy corridors in his black leather jacket, blaster pistol on his hip. Hostile aliens glared, but he paid them no mind. In a dimly lit dive bar, Dylan slid onto a stool. The wiry insectoid bartender eyed him warily. "Whiskey neat," Dylan grunted. He downed the shot and fixed the bartender with a stare. "Any high-paying merc work floating around?" The Talaxian leaned in, multifaceted eyes darting. "There's a job, pays 50 million credits, but it's from Misa." "The ruthless warlord with the alien tech?" "That's the one. Want some dumb motherfucker to go into the forbidden zone. The job's suicide." A slow grin spread across Dylan's face. 50 million, huh? Consider me your dumb motherfucker." He tossed a credit chip on the bar and activated his comm. "Saddle up, boys, we got work. Meet me at the ship in 5. Dylan had no idea what horrors lurked in the forbidden zone. No one did. But while the rest of the galaxy trembled in fear, the humans would be the first to find out, if they had the balls to face the unknown head-on. The Razor's Edge shuddered as it dropped out of warp. Dylan leaned forward, squinting at the view screen. What the hell? Instead of the rendezvous ship he expected, a massive space station loomed before them. It bristled with enough weaponry to glass a planet. "We're being hailed," Tycho reported, his long fingers flying over the comms panel. Dylan nodded. "Put it through." A cold, cultured voice filled the bridge. "Captain Lewis, welcome to Starfall Station. You may dock at airlock C7. Lord Mizar will meet you there." The transmission cut off abruptly. Dylan exchanged a glance with Zack, his first mate. The burly man's cybernetic eye whirred as he raised an eyebrow. "Trap," Zack rumbled. "Could be." Dylan drummed his fingers on the armrest. "But the payoff's too good to pass up. We dock, but stay sharp." The Razor's Edge slid into the airlock with a clang and a hiss of pressure equalization. The hatch cycled open, revealing a grim-faced welcoming party. In the center stood Mizar himself, a lean figure in a dark, high-collared suit. His pale skin and jet-black hair gave him a severe, almost sinister look. 2 massive reptilian bodyguards flanked him, cradling plasma rifles. "Captain Lewis," Mizar said, his lips curling in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you for coming. Please follow me. We have much to discuss." As they walked through the stark gunmetal-grey corridors of the station, Mizar began to speak in a soft, almost hypnotic cadence. "What do you know of the Krill, Captain?" Dylan shrugged. "Not much. Ancient aliens, super advanced, disappeared a long time ago, left behind their tech." "Indeed, 50,000 years ago to be precise, and the Forbidden Zone is where they were last seen." Mizar paused before a large viewport. Beyond the reinforced glass, the swirling anomaly of the Forbidden Zone filled the void, a maelstrom of flickering light and shadow. Many have tried to penetrate its secrets. None have returned. But the potential rewards— Mizar turned, his eyes glittering. "Weapons, Captain. Technologies beyond imagining. Enough to make one the undisputed master of known space." Dylan crossed his arms. "And you want me to go in there and get them for you?" "Precisely. You're resourceful, clever, and if you'll forgive me, just reckless enough to try." Mizar smiled thinly. "The Krill were rumored to command forces we can only dream of. Advanced AI, nanotechnology, energies that could reshape the very fabric of the universe." He leaned forward. "Bring me what lies within, and I will make you rich beyond your wildest imaginings." Dylan met Mizar's gaze steadily. "I'll need an advance for expenses." Mizar waved a hand dismissively. "Done." He gestured to one of his guards, who stepped forward and handed Dylan a sleek, angular weapon, all gleaming black metal and pulsing red lights. "Hand a gesture of goodwill, an advanced plasma caster, reverse-engineered from technology we recovered from the edge of the zone, far superior to that crude blaster on your hip. Dylan took the weapon, feeling its weight. He flicked a glance at Zack, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "All right," Dylan said. "I'm in, but if this is a setup—" Mizar spread his hands. "I assure you, Captain, my intentions are entirely genuine. There are vast riches to be had, if you are bold enough to seize them." Dylan holstered the plasma caster. Bold, huh? Mizar had no idea who he was dealing with. Dylan and his crew would punch into the heart of the Forbidden Zone and drag out whatever secrets it held. And if Mizar tried to stab them in the back afterwards, well, there was a reason you didn't cross humans. Dylan would show him that reason, written in fire and blood. Dylan gripped the controls tightly as the Razor's Edge crossed into the Forbidden Zone. The usual chatter of comm traffic and sensor pings faded into an eerie silence. Zack frowned at his console. "I'm picking up some weird energy readings, but no signs of life. It's a dead zone out there." Tycho's long fingers danced over the sensor array. The anomalies are fascinating. Quantum fluctuations, dark energy spikes. His enthusiasm was cut short as the ship lurched violently. Alarms blared. "What the fuck?" Dylan fought the controls. "We're caught in some kind of tractor beam." "It's incredibly strong," Tycho reported, his voice tight. "Engines are at maximum, but we can't break free." Through the view screen, a massive structure loomed into view. It was a space station, but unlike any Dylan had ever seen. Its surface was a nightmarish blend of sleek metal and pulsing, organic-looking growths. Despite their struggles, the Razor's Edge was dragged inexorably into a yawning hangar bay. With a bone-jarring thud, the ship settled to the deck. Dylan checked his pistol and the alien plasma caster. "Zack, you're with me. Tycho, stay with the ship. Keep the engines hot." The atmosphere in the hangar was breathable, if thin. Dylan and Zack moved cautiously through the dimly lit space, their boots ringing on the deck. The walls seemed to shift and undulate at the edges of their vision, blurring the line between machine and living tissue. Hulking shapes loomed out of the shadows, the wrecks of alien ships. Some were small, barely larger than fighters. Others were massive, dwarfing the Razor's Edge. All bore signs of terrible damage, their hulls mangled and torn. Some even seemed fused to the station itself, as if they'd been partially absorbed. "Jesus," Zack muttered. "The krill must have been even more advanced than Mizar said. This is beyond any nanotech I've ever seen." As they ventured deeper into the station, they began to find traces of the krill themselves. Strange insectoid exoskeletons, shattered and empty. Fragments of technology so advanced its function was impossible to guess. A skittering sound made them freeze. From the walls and ceiling, a swarm of spider-like drones descended, a nightmarish fusion of machine and living matter. Zack didn't hesitate. His plasma rifle barked, sending bolts of searing energy into the swarm. But the drones simply absorbed the blasts, shimmering fields flickering around them. "Shit, no effect." Dylan drew the weapon Mizar had given him. He aimed and fired in one smooth motion. A lance of blinding white shot from the muzzle, spearing a drone. It disintegrated instantly, reduced to drifting motes. Zack raised an eyebrow. "Effective!" Dylan grinned fiercely and kept firing, the weapon humming in his hands. Drones fell by the dozens, but more kept coming, an endless tide pouring from the station's innards. "We need to move, back to the ship." They fought their way back through the twisting corridors, the swarm hounding their every step. The Razor's Edge was in sight when a massive drone, larger than a man, lunged from the shadows. Zack cried out as it bore him to the ground, its limbs puncturing his suit. Dylan blasted the thing to pieces, but more were coming. He dragged Zack up the ramp, the drones clawing at their heels. He slapped the hatch control. "Tycho, get us out of here!" Nothing happened. The ship remained locked in place. Tycho's voice crackled over the comm, panicked. "The tractor beam, it's still got us!" Dylan's mind raced. The drones were starting to cut through the hull, the screech of parting metal filling the air. They had minutes, maybe less. "Tycho, you've got to tap into the station, shut down the beam." "I'm trying. Their systems are like nothing I've seen before. Zack struggled to his feet, his face pale. We'll hold them off. Do what you can. He raised his rifle, his jaw set. Dylan and Zack poured fire into the advancing swarm, the air thick with the stench of burning metal and flesh. But for every drone they destroyed, 2 more took its place. They were being driven back, step by step. Dylan's weapon clicked empty. He hurled it at the drones and drew his trusty blaster. Zack was slumped against the wall, his cybernetic eye flickering. They locked gazes, a lifetime of friendship passing between them. Suddenly the ship lurched. The drones as one went rigid and collapsed. Tycho's triumphant whoop echoed through the ship. "Got it! We're free!" Dylan hauled Zack to the cockpit. Through the view screen, the station receded behind them as they blasted away at full burn. Dylan slumped into the pilot's chair, his mind reeling. They'd barely scratched the surface of the station, and yet what they'd seen was beyond anything he could have imagined, if that was just a taste of the Krill's power. He shook his head. They were alive. That was what mattered. But as the Forbidden Zone faded into the void behind them, Dylan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The secrets of the Krill were still out there, and he had a sinking certainty that one way or another he was going to find them. The Razor's Edge shuddered as it dropped out of warp, safely away from the nightmarish Krill station. Dylan slumped back in his chair, his mind reeling from their narrow escape. Zack groaned, clutching his wounds as Tycho tended to him with the ship's medkit. Dylan's comm pinged. It was Mizar. He took a deep breath and accepted the call. "Captain Lewis." Mizar's cold voice filled the cockpit. "Report." Dylan recounted their harrowing encounter in terse, clipped sentences. To his surprise, Mizar seemed unsurprised by the horrors they'd witnessed. "Very well," Mizar said when Dylan finished. "Return to these coordinates immediately for a face-to-face debriefing." A string of numbers flashed on the screen. Dylan frowned but acknowledged the order. The Razor's Edge leapt back into warp. They emerged at a heavily fortified Talaxian military outpost, bristling with gun turrets and warships. Dylan whistled low. Mizar's not playing around. A fighter escort led them to a landing pad. Armed guards ushered Dylan into a Spartan briefing room, where Mizar awaited, flanked by his ever-present bodyguards. "Captain," Mizar greeted, his voice silky. "It seems there was more to the Krill than I initially revealed." Dylan crossed his arms. "No shit! Those drones nearly tore us apart. What the hell are we really dealing with?" Mizar steepled his fingers. The Krill were masters of biotechnology and AI. At their height, they created sentient, self-replicating nanotech swarms capable of devouring entire planets. A chill ran down Dylan's spine. "And that station?" "I believe it's a factory for these swarms. The Krill's sudden disappearance was likely due to them losing control of their own creations." Dylan shook his head in disbelief. "Jesus Christ!" Mizar leaned forward, his eyes glittering. "I want you to lead a heavily armed force back to secure that nanotech for weaponization." Dylan laughed harshly. "Are you insane? That tech is way too dangerous and unpredictable. No way in hell." Mizar's face darkened. "Need I remind you of our arrangement? I'm paying you a fortune." "Keep your damn money," Dylan snapped. "No payday is worth risking an uncontrollable planet-killing nanotech swarm." Mizar's bodyguards reached for their weapons. Dylan tensed, ready to draw. "I wouldn't," he said softly. Under the table, he had Mizar's advanced weapon trained on the warlord. "I'm done with this job. Find some other sucker." He stood to leave. Mizar's voice stopped him cold. "You're making a mistake, Captain. You don't want me as an enemy." Dylan paused at the door and looked back. A wry smile tugged at his lips. "I'm human. We're used to having dangerous enemies." With that, he strode from the room, leaving a fuming Mizar behind. Back on the Razor's Edge, Dylan punched in a course, putting the outpost behind them at maximum burn. Zack, patched up but grim, met his eyes. "This isn't over, is it?" "No," Dylan said quietly, watching the stars streak past. "It's just beginning, and we're going to be ready for whatever comes next." Dylan gripped the controls, his knuckles white as he wove the razor's edge through the deadly dance of laser fire and missiles. The ambush had come out of nowhere, a swarm of Talaxian warships descending upon them like vengeful angels. Mizar's face filled the view screen, his eyes cold and merciless. "You should have taken my offer, Captain. Now you'll die out here in the void, and your precious secrets with you." The ship shuddered as a barrage slammed into their shields. Sparks cascaded from overloaded consoles. Zack cried out as an explosion sent him crashing to the deck, blood pooling beneath him. "Zack!" Dylan shouted, but there was no time. He jinked and juked, trying to evade the encircling warships. Tycho's long fingers flew over the controls, rerouting power to the failing shields. "Shields at 20%. We can't take much more of this." Dylan gritted his teeth. He triggered Mizar's advanced weapon, sending lances of blinding energy spearing into the Talaxian formation. Ships exploded, torn apart by the devastating power. But more kept coming, an endless swarm bent on their destruction. The Razor's Edge was a tough ship, but she wasn't built for this kind of punishment. Alarms blared as critical systems failed one by one. Dylan fought the controls, trying to keep them alive for just a few seconds longer. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the battlefield. A massive ship, dwarfing even the largest Talaxian warships, emerged from the depths of the Forbidden Zone. Its hull was a nightmarish fusion of metal and organic tissue, pulsing with an eerie inner light. The unknown ship opened fire, and the Talaxian fleet simply ceased to exist. Beams of searing energy cut through shields and hull alike, vaporizing ships in an instant. The Razor's Edge shuddered as the shockwaves hit, alarms screaming as the hull breached in a dozen places. Dylan dragged himself to Zack's side, desperately trying to staunch the bleeding. Tycho worked frantically at the sputtering life support console. "We're losing atmosphere. I can't stop it." As the darkness closed in, the view screen flickered to life. An insectoid face filled the screen, its multifaceted eyes fixing Dylan with an unblinking stare. "Captain Dylan Lewis, we have been watching you." The voice was strange, buzzing and clicking, but the words were clear. Dylan stared in shock. It was a Krill, alive and speaking to him. "You have shown great courage and resourcefulness. You have proven yourself worthy of our attention." The Krill explained that their race had never truly vanished, but had instead entered a state of dormancy, waiting for a species worthy of inheriting their legacy. A species with the wisdom to wield their technology responsibly. "We offer you a choice, Captain. Join us. Help guide your species to greatness, or perish here and be forgotten." Dylan looked at Zack, unconscious and bleeding. At Tycho, his face tight with fear. The Krill technology was beyond anything he had ever imagined. With it, humanity could leap forward centuries in a single bound. But at what cost? The Krill had been consumed by their own creations. Their power had driven them to the brink of extinction. Could humanity fare any better? In that moment, Dylan made his choice. He met the Krill's gaze, his voice steady. "I appreciate the offer, but we'll find our own way. Humanity will reach the stars on our own terms, not as the inheritors of someone else's legacy." There was a long pause. Then, to Dylan's surprise, the Krill nodded slowly. "As you wish. Perhaps you are indeed the ones we have been waiting for." The screen went dark. The massive ship turned, vanishing into the void as silently as it had appeared. In its wake, the Razor's Edge drifted, broken but unbowed. Dylan sagged back, exhaustion washing over him. Zack groaned, his eyes fluttering open. Tycho let out a shaky breath. "We're alive, barely." Dylan nodded. He looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of the future pressing down on him. The Krill had thought humanity worthy. Now it was up to him to prove them right. He turned to his crew, his friends, his family. "Let's go home." The Razor's Edge limped onward, a tiny mote of light in the infinite dark. Earth was waiting, and Dylan had a feeling their greatest adventures were still ahead. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.